Welcome to Beyond Disruption, where you'll learn how emerging tech is changing the world of accounting, business, and finance. Our guest experts break down the latest news in everything from blockchain to robotics, artificial intelligence to human intelligence. Tune in to find out how you can stay ahead of the curve.
Welcome to the Beyond Disruption podcast. My name is Zenaida Mahmoud-Efendic from the Durham, North Carolina office of AICPA and CIMA. I'm very excited to have a conversation today with Areiel Wolanow, Managing Director of Finserv Experts, about tech buzzwords you might be hearing in 2019, their pros and cons, and much more. We will touch on artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, but first I'd like to welcome our guest. So Areiel, you're joining me from halfway around the world. So where are you currently?
I am currently in the Intercontinental Grand Stanford, Hong Kong, overlooking Causeway Bay over to the island. And there's a fog settling in, obscuring the top of the building. So it's quite picturesque.
That sounds beautiful. So just to introduce you a little bit to our listeners, you have served as a senior advisor in blockchain, machine learning, and technology adoption for central banks and even the UK Parliament. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been working in business transformation for over 30 years now, in one form or another, primarily in the financial services industry. I spent 12 of those years with IBM. About 2.5 years ago, I started my own consultancy, Finserv Experts. Our clients have included Lloyd's of London, Central Bank of Thailand. I'm currently working with Deutsche Telekom to help them craft some blockchain service offerings with the capability of their digital trust team.
You were a CPA in your past life, and digital transformation is actually a huge buzzword in our industry right now. So can you comment a little bit about what that means for our industry?
Well, digital transformation, like many such buzzwords, was a term coined by consultants to convince businesses that there's a compelling need to spend money. However, in this case, it does happen to be true, in the sense that digital transformation can be really defined as taking a set of business processes, and primarily those processes geared around interacting with the customer at various points, sales, service, and so forth, and re-engineering those processes so that they take place via entirely digital channels, most commonly mobile phones.
If hiring trends are any indication, data science, machine learning, robotics, we're hearing all about it. Artificial intelligence is considered one of the biggest commercial opportunities right now. So why do you think this is the case, and what does that mean?
A lot gets written about AI, and most of it is about the longer-term potential that AI has to transform pretty much every aspect of our lives. While that's true, and I'm a big believer in the potential and in the positive ways that it can impact our lives, the spending and the money that's going on right now is considerably more tactical for the most part. Science, studies have shown, and these studies go back into the 1950s and 1960s, that if two competing companies have similar levels of capability, and one company has even a 1% efficiency advantage over another, then it is a matter of time before that company puts the other out of business. Small advantages in operation, in speed, in cost, repeated over time, predictably, yield compelling competitive position. As a result, firms today are looking at ways to invest in various kinds of AI, whether it's natural language processing, machine learning, or others, to get that advantage. So if AI allows one company's marketing campaign to be marginally more successful than another, or if students or doctors using AI decision support tools are able to do slightly better diagnosis or slightly better research, that slight advantage is enough to secure a long-term competitive gain. And that's what's really driving the hiring and the focus in AI and machine learning right now.
So while we're speaking of opportunities, we can't not mention blockchain. And we know that 90% of American and European banks have been exploring blockchain. We've already heard about DLT and blockchain supply chains in our previous podcasts. What is new in blockchain in 2019?
Well, blockchain is probably about 80% of what my firm does. And as I said, currently we're engaged in a major blockchain project with Deutsche Telekom. The main thing I think you're going to see in 2019 is a number of significant enterprise production releases. Most of the work that's been going on in blockchain has been in the area of exploration, proof of concepts, prototypes, a limited number of pilots. But a number of major enterprises, both in the financial services and in the supply chain arenas, are scheduled to go to live full production releases in 2019. There will inevitably be missteps and mistakes made along that path. So I expect to see some significant production numbers. I expect to see some issues that we haven't anticipated, and I expect to see growing widespread adoption. And it may be that some of your other guests have mentioned this in prior podcasts, but blockchain is an enabling technology. It doesn't necessarily change the way the front end of an application would work. The most successful blockchain applications are ones that you might not know even are blockchain applications. It is more about, or the benefit comes more from business models that are enabled than and things you can do in terms of distributing decision-making and trust that you couldn't do before.
Absolutely. And there's also an opportunity here for financial inclusion. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is an area that I'm personally quite passionate about. I spent 2 years in Kenya in 2014 and 2015 leading a team that used machine learning to develop a credit score application or algorithm for M-Pesa, which is the world-leading mobile payment solution that's in Kenya. This machine learning application allowed millions of small loans to be generated for people who could not otherwise qualify for credit. And these are primarily in the nature of small business loans. There was a study done in a neighboring country, Tanzania, that looked at emerging micro business, and they defined that as a business that grew from 1 employee to 10 employees. So over the 2 years of the study, of all the single employee businesses, only 2% of those businesses grew from 1 to 10 employees. So a very small number. But that 2% was responsible for 25% of all job creation in the country over that time. So if by making credit more available to these small businesses, we could move that 2% to even 3%, we can have a truly profound impact on poverty, on the overall economy of such a country. And that's really what financial inclusion is about. AI is typically thought of and written of as a technology that has the potential to destroy jobs. But financial inclusion is one of just many examples where AI can in fact create jobs far in excess of the jobs that it displaces. That being said, there is something to think about. While AI may create many, many more jobs than it destroys, they won't be the same jobs. Those jobs won't be in the same places. The result is that many people who have current jobs will be disrupted by this and will lose those jobs. And historically, we've done a pretty bad job of managing that kind of change. We need to do a better job. There is no reason we can't look at financial inclusion as one example and say, yes, it is poised to create jobs here and here and here. And at the same time say, okay, but here are the jobs that are going away. And do something more to look after the people who are going to be disrupted. There's obviously plenty of additional wealth being created, plenty of poverty being eradicated. So there should be the resources to address this disruption in a more successful, efficient, and compassionate way than we have in the past.
This is something we're definitely seeing in the accounting and finance industry as well. So do you have any recommendations for people whose roles may actually be very disrupted by emerging technology?
Yes, and the advice is, I can encapsulate it in one word, learn. Don't wait. I run an activity when I'm talking about change management where I sit down pieces of newspaper on the floor in a room, and I tell people that it's kind of like a game of musical chairs. When the music stops, if you will, you have to go stand on a piece of newspaper. And over time, I start picking up the pieces so that there are fewer pieces of newspaper. And eventually people figure out to share the newspaper and stand. And more pieces keep getting picked up. What's interesting about this experiment is that on a table right near where people are standing, there's a big pile of extra newspapers. And I don't say anything about it, but there's no rule against somebody going and getting some extra of those papers, and finding more pieces of paper to stand on. But what's interesting is it's not until nobody, it's not until the point where nobody can fit on a piece of paper that somebody thinks to go get those extra pieces of newspaper. The newspapers were there all along, and this is an interesting trend of human behavior. Okay, people can see where this is going. They see the pieces of newspaper picked up, but it isn't until the point of crisis that they creatively think of going to get the extra pieces. They can go get those pieces at any time. Okay, so applying that here, if you're in an industry or you're in a job that's going to be disrupted, you will typically have years of advance notice that this is coming. It's not a secret. Okay, and the direction of travel is obvious. Act before the crisis point. Get the newspaper early. That's my advice.
I'm Zenaida Mahmoud-Efendic with fintech expert Areiel Wolanow. We'll be talking about GDPR and privacy when our conversation continues in a minute or two. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome our new listeners who are discovering the Go Beyond Disruption podcast for the first time.
Are you ready for disruption? Join us in Chicago, Illinois, April 24th through 26th at the AICPA CFO Conference to find out. The CFO Conference keeps you at the cutting edge of the financial industry with 22 sessions developed for CFOs by CFOs, 33 subject matter experts, and 2 professional networking sessions. It's the one event of the year specifically designed to prepare you for disruption and provide you with the opportunities to advance your career and make your mark in the C-suite world. Get $75 off when you register before March 12th and use promo code CFO19 for an extra $75 off for a total savings of $150. But don't worry, if you're hearing this podcast after March 12th, you can still use promo code CFO19. And if you can't attend the CFO conference in person, you can still join us online so you don't miss out, with all of our exclusive sessions streamed live in real time straight to your computer or mobile device. You'll also have access to remote networking, chat rooms, handouts, and slides, just as if you were there with us on site. Register today at aicpastore.com/CFO, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the 2019 CFO Conference.
You're listening to the Go Beyond Disruption podcast. Let's pick up on our conversation with Areiel Wolanow about trends to watch in 2019. Artificial intelligence and blockchain will drive regulation expansion as well. GDPR compliance and privacy concerns have already demonstrated that. Is there an opportunity for accounting, audit, and finance professionals as advisors in reg tech? It's another buzzword.
In a word, yes, there is. One of the things that's important to understand is how fast data is proliferating. It is the growth of data is moving exponentially upward. IBM recently estimated that 90% of all the data in the world has been created in the last 2 years. What this means is that typical methods of assurance are going to fall far short. Whether you're auditing GDPR compliance or you're doing a traditional financial audit, you won't be able to do the same statistically driven process checks. There's too much data to check. So either we're going to need, in the nature of 20 times more accountants than we have now in the next 7 years, which doesn't seem likely, or we're going to have to come up with other ways of providing the same level of compliance, of audit, and of assurance of both traditional and new kinds. So RegTech firms are aware of that, and the innovators in this space see that there's a need there, and they're actively working to solve it. What they need is the subject matter expertise. So if you look at GDPR compliance or you look at financial auditing, the questions don't change. So the questions an auditor needs to understand to give a qualified or unqualified opinion are the same questions, but how those questions get answered changed. So there's a huge need for subject matter expertise from accountants, from lawyers, and from other finance professionals. But the professionals who get these opportunities are the ones who understand how the method for answering the questions will change.
Through your involvement at the UK parliamentary level, in the EU, at the Deutsche Telekom, and at the global level via the G20 forum, what kinds of discussions are occurring based on technology trend predictions, and are there any misconceptions about them that need to be cleared up?
Well, one of the interesting things in this space, and this is regarding both AI and blockchain, is that the attitude towards regulators and regulation is quite different from what one normally expects from business. Blockchain in particular is perhaps counterintuitive in that it is an area where businesses are crying out for more regulation rather than less. Lack of regulatory certainty is probably one of the two biggest inhibitors to investment in growth in both blockchain and AI. Regulators are aware of this, and again, perhaps unusually, most of the regulators that I've talked to in the UK, in Indonesia, in Thailand, and Singapore are surprisingly plugged in and very, very interested in helping make the businesses in their respective countries strong and competitive. It doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't mean that things are going to go as fast as we'd like. But I'm seeing a lot of the right attitudes from the regulatory community. The things that the regulators are looking at is not that different from accountants or other financial professionals. The questions are the same. The ways of answering those questions may change. Regulators still have a job to look after the safety, security, and well-being of the people in their country, to make sure that businesses are competing fairly and that are compliant with current laws and regulations. But the way the regulators perform that assurance process has to change because of the proliferation of data. And most regulators that I've spoken with are aware of that and are actively working on ways to change how they do their jobs.
So we often have expectations that innovation and new technologies mean progress, but that's not always the case. There are a few anti-patterns where technology enables regression, and we should pay attention to that as well.
Sure.
Can you share some examples?
One of the biggest hot trends of late within the AI field has been something called RPA, robotic process automation. I view RPA to be a hugely regressive technology. It is a way of prolonging the life of legacy solutions that inhibit growth, that inhibit innovation, and that are barriers to not only productivity, but to the kind of security and safety that these regulations like GDPR are looking after. It's very, very hard to secure some of these older systems. RPA has been around by other names for a long time. In the 1990s, the same thing was called screen scraping. The only difference now is that they're able to use machine learning and other forms of AI to make RPA more efficient and require less manual programming to replicate a process. But there's always been a great interest in finding ways to shore up legacy systems. And I don't think my belief that this is regressive is going to change that. I think our RPA is unfortunately a growth industry and will continue to do so. But I view it as an inhibitor to growth and change. Another example in the machine learning space is the level of bias that the researchers are coming to understand. If you are training, say, a program to improve the ability for doctors to make medical diagnoses, but the training sets are skewed towards affluent white people because they get more medical care, so therefore there are more medical records. You're going to end up with a set of inferences in your machine learner algorithm that are biased. So this is a big issue, and it's something that researchers are actively working on ways to solve. But it's something that anybody who is thinking about using machine learning should be aware that just because you have an algorithm where and you're smart enough not to include things like race as input variables doesn't mean that your result will end up being unbiased.
So something like RPA could be an intermediary for something else to come. And IoT is also interesting because of the hype, yet lack of real adoption. And intelligence of things seems to be more of a focus now as an intermediary for Internet of Things. So will the Internet of Things take off in 2019?
Somebody once said something about AI, I'm trying to remember who it was, that said anything that actually gets implemented stops being AI. This is actually an answer about your IoT question. I'm going to approach it obliquely, so bear with me. I did my first machine learning project in 2014. It was the project in Kenya that I was telling you about. And 2 weeks in, I invited my chief data scientist out to dinner, and I wanted him to brief me and educate me on the sort of mathematical techniques that we would be using to construct our algorithm. Figure that if I'm running this project, I should at least know a little bit about it. So he started walking me through the logistic regression and the tree ensemble analysis he was going to use. And I realized that I actually knew these techniques. I had learned them when I was an undergrad at UC Irvine in 1982 and 1983. I majored in econometrics, and these techniques were part of what I studied, which was astounding to me. Now, our ability to use these techniques actively in predictive modeling was quite limited by the technology of the time. We just didn't have the computing horsepower to use those techniques in the way that they're now being used. But there was nothing particularly new or revolutionary about the underlying mathematical algorithms. They were just now being able to be deployed much more productively. And yet this is called AI, and this is called new. I think the same kind of thinking applies to Internet of Things. There are sensors and devices that have been connected to the Internet for a while now. Sat-nav in cars has been around for, 2 decades? That's an Internet of Things application. We don't think about that when we talk about IoT. I think Internet of Things as a buzzword is about the things that are coming, not the things we already have. So what I think we'll see in 2019 is the same thing we saw 5 years ago, and the same thing we'll see 5 years from now. The buzzword will apply to the things that haven't been done yet, but more and more things will get done.
And it's likely that some of the buzzing technologies will have a shorter life cycle than others.
Sure.
What do you anticipate staying on a global radar long term?
Well, one thing is cryptocurrency, which is going to have a much longer adoption cycle. Cryptocurrency, whether it's replication of existing fiat currency or if it's currencies that are not tied to any government, like Bitcoin, is inevitable. Its adoption is inevitable because it offers the same kind of improvements in portability, exchangeability, and safety that each monetary innovation over history has offered over the others. It's worth looking at the adoption cycles for the other major monetary innovations. Moving from barter to specie, in other words, coinage, took millennia to accomplish. Moving from coin to paper took centuries. Moving from paper to card took decades. Moving from card to crypto will take less time because these cycles are growing shorter. But it doesn't mean that it's something that's going to happen in the next 5 or the next 10 years. It's going to be a longer adoption. And each innovation never completely replaces the prior. Okay? As we have gone through this evolution of how we exchange value, none of the old technologies have disappeared. We still barter. We still use coins. Not as much, but we use them. We still use paper. We still use cards. So crypto will never make these other things completely go away. But it's still going to be quite a while before the majority of our transactions are conducted in crypto. So it will be on the radar for some time to come.
Yes, it's been very interesting to watch cryptocurrency over the past couple of years. And I'm looking forward to really learning more and seeing where it goes. So what is one last message you'd like to leave for the accounting and finance professionals that will help them go beyond disruption?
I think I'd like to reiterate what we discussed earlier, particularly around financial service professionals. Your job and the way you do your job is going to change. And the people who see the newspapers being picked up and act are the ones who are going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. The people who don't are the ones who are going to be disrupted. You can debate with some validity about whether these disruptions are going to be fast or slow, but they are inevitable. And the sooner that you get involved and to a point where you understand how these technologies will impact your job, the more likely you are able to be one of the people who can capitalize on the opportunities that are emerging.
Thank you so much, Areiel, for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
So as technology innovation is impacting the value of existing products and services across industries, they are disrupting the current markets, the consumer needs, and businesses really need to embrace it and plan for it. So learning about the pros and cons, as Areiel also mentioned in this episode, can really keep you ahead of the game and create opportunities. I wanted to give everyone a heads up about our Promise of Technology course coming out in March and some of our major program certificates on blockchain, data analytics, and cybersecurity on both our AICPA store for AICPA members and our CGMA store for CIMA members. As you learn more about the implications of these trends in our industry and their pros and cons, be sure to ask yourself a few questions. How might these trends impact your job and your team and your workplace? How are competitors and other industries addressing these trends? And how will these trends influence your clients and your customers? For more exclusive insights and perspectives every week, get our latest episodes wherever you're already listening to your podcasts. It's automatic and totally free. Just tap the subscribe or follow button on the app you already use. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, and TuneIn Radio. You can also just search for Go Beyond Disruption podcast anywhere online. We hope that you got something useful from this episode, and if you did, go ahead and share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too. I'm Zenaida. We'll be back soon with more insights that help your profession go beyond disruption. Until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the AICPA or AICPA.org. It is provided with the understanding that the AICPA and AICPA.org are not engaged in offering legal, accounting, or other professional service. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The AICPA and AICPA.org make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to, and assume no responsibility for, the content or application of the material contained herein, and especially disclaim all liability for any damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material. Such material. Such material. Such material.